evidence.
There, I started a new recording. We will strike that from the record.
Why.
No outtakes.
We will strike that from the record. Oh, here comes Jennifer.
I can neither
All
confirm.
right. Shh.
Now that there's a woman in the room, we have to be careful and quiet. I really do have to be careful what I say.
No.
Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning. So what did I miss? Now I'm super curious.
Actually, that was kind of the whole point, was to make you think you missed something when in fact you missed nothing.
All right.
We were starting to joke that it was only men in here. And what that might mean for us lonely men. Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Is that an actual picture of your yard?
That looks
Jennifer?
like a fake background.
It's not. It's real.
It's not?
I took it
Oh
the
my
other
God.
day. It's our corn.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it's a virtual background, but it is an actual picture. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, it's a virtual background. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, there's people in the chat. I mean, anyway, you guys are letting them in, so we're all good. So, anyway. At least now we have some women in here. We started off with 4 men, and it was getting a little scary.
So Seth, I was supposed to get my delivery yesterday, and about 6:30 they sent me a message saying that
It's delayed?
it wasn't going to come, and it might show up sometime in the next couple of days. And I was like, oh man.
I hate when they do that. That's why sometimes I forget, but I try to make a point to remember to check off like Prime, because that's the only way you know for sure delivery is going to be guaranteed for the date that they say it will be.
So was mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I pulled the trigger on mine. I finally bought mine last night. I was literally encouraged to do it by my therapist.
Yeah, there you go. Sometimes you just got to treat yourself.
Yep, that's exactly what he said to me. He's like, you have to stop feeling guilty about buying yourself nice things. So for those of you who are wondering what the hell we're talking about, we're talking about drones. We're on a drone buying thing now. So Greg got one. Now I've got
maybe
one.
next week my virtual background will be something
learn more about your neighbors, right?
Recorded. Exactly. Well, see, and I got this one with the Zoom camera, so I can properly stalk people.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note, I'm going to start the process of going live on Facebook. You guys talk amongst yourselves. I'll be back in about 20 minutes. Kidding, of course, sort of.
It doesn't take that long anymore.
It's gotten a little better. I'll give credit. It's gotten a little better. Not a lot. Just a little.
But it definitely doesn't give us on Facebook the alert anymore. And that was what I think drew a lot of folks to our Facebook audience.
Yeah. Titles, share to the group, Accounting Business Academy, and go live. All right, I'm waiting. All right, it says live preparing, but wait, here we go. That one just took a minute. Taking its time.
Webinar is now streaming live on Facebook.
Yeah, Zoom is always way ahead and says it's streaming live while I'm still waiting for Facebook to kind of catch up. And then as it's still the case that once it reroutes me back into Facebook, it doesn't take me to the video feed, which you would think that would be that's exactly where I'd want to go. Instead, I'm just in my general news feed where there's no sign of the video. So then I have to go over to my page on Facebook because that's where I broadcast live. And of course, it's the most recent post. So at least now I can get in there. And then I have to mute the volume on that one. Otherwise, I hear myself, and I don't like to hear myself.
Yeah, so it's showing the live video, but there was no notification of it.
Yeah, I don't know why.
You know how we were talking about notifications,
Yeah.
in 87 and up earlier, Facebook notifications, and they used to get a lot of people over here, I think.
Yeah, no, because there would be a whole bunch of people that would join the live Facebook feed, because I'm guessing it would issue a notification saying Nerd Enterprises has gone live. I don't know. Maybe there's something in my settings that I need to change. Although it is telling me that we had 6, it went to 5. We lost somebody. Who was that person? I want to know. Who quit on us? Anyway, good morning. We're live. Happy Friday. It's June 12th, 2020. And today we're going to talk about how to do a webinar. We're doing a webinar on how to do webinars. It's all very circular and circuitous.
Which would have been really awkward when it was just us guys.
Don't go there with me, Greg. I'll say something inappropriate and then I'll get called out for it.
That would never happen.
No, of course not. I only ever say appropriate things. Only appropriate things. You can't joke around these days. Nobody's got a sense of humor anymore. Anyway, I digress. Let's talk about doing a webinar and how to do webinars, right? So before I dive in, does anybody have any questions about how to do webinars? Joking aside, something specific that you're wondering, like, is anybody here? Let me ask you this. Show of hands. You could raise your virtual hand if you want, in the participants list in Zoom. Who out of the group of us who are here actually wants to do webinars? Okay.
I think I may eventually want to do webinars. I don't.
Okay, as long as you have the desire to do webinars, then you can qualify as a member of Webinars Anonymous, right? The only requirement for membership is a desire to do webinars.
I have a question actually related to webinars.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you do slides and how do you manage them? Because that's always something. I've done a couple webinars, but I'm always like fumbling with the slides.
So I am not a huge fan of doing slides, and especially I think because generally speaking, my sort of genre or format is that I'm always doing some kind of a demonstration of some software or something, right? And I don't like slides. Even when I'm an attendee in a webinar, and I get bored with the slides. I'd much rather see somebody share their screen or just have the camera on them, be lively, be energetic, give me some good information. I don't know. When I do slides, I'll take this sort of Steve Jobs approach as I understand it of how to do them, where I'll have like one word on a slide, which will be my like trigger to remember what I want to talk about for a few minutes. And then I move on to the next slide, like very minimalist in terms of the slides. I've seen presentations where the slides, they're like a textbook. You have big print and then all this fine print and bullet points, and there's so much stuff on there that I get instantly overwhelmed and I don't want to read it. And then there's some of these slides I've seen start to look like a children's coloring book, right? Because there's all different size fonts and colors, and it's like I can't even look at it anymore. It like hurts my eyes, right? That's my opinion. I know that most presenters do slides. If you're going to do slides, I highly recommend Google Slides, because that lives in the web and it's easy to embed and share, and all the things that you get to do with Google that you can't do quite as easily with Microsoft. Matthew's not here today, right? Okay, good. I can talk shit about Microsoft.
I was just going to say too, often people like copies of the slides so they can go back to the information of what you talked about, right?
So what I do instead of that, which I think is much better and more valuable, is I'll usually have a document with lots of notes, right? And actually it's part of what I'm going to go through today is I make detailed notes, and I start with an outline and then I start filling it in, and I end up with detailed notes and sometimes even screenshots, and I'll share that with people. In fact, if I'm doing a live presentation as opposed to a webinar, what I'll usually do is I'll do a little list building, and I'll say, hey, if you want my detailed notes, give me your email address. I'll send you the notes, right? And it's a way of getting people to opt in and, to get emails from me. So I'm building my list. Obviously, they can opt out if they want to right after they get the notes. So they can take advantage of it just for that. But my hope is that people will stick around on my email list so I can stay in touch with them and send out the weekly updates that I send out.
I have a question.
Wait, Jennifer, you're muted, so I didn't hear any. I don't know if you're. Oh, you weren't talking to us. Okay. Perfect. It's a good thing I can't read lips.
I have a question for you. So in
Huh?
order to do webinars, you have to have the paid Zoom of some sort, right?
There is a Zoom webinar product, which is exactly what I'm using right now. And so that's what allows you to do the registrations. And keep in mind that's, some people might be inclined to say, well, that's how you capture emails, but that's not the legal way to capture emails unless you somehow make it clear, which I've done in the past by saying, by registering for this webinar, you're also opting into my email list. The whole CAN Spam Act thing kicks in here, and you have to be very careful that you can't just assume because somebody registered for your webinar that it's okay to add them to your email list, right? And yet we've probably all done it at some point or another. And just kind of like I had a separate list just for people who registered for my Zoom webinars, and I used to just email that list and say, hey, I'm sending you this because you've registered for a Zoom webinar in the past, and you're welcome to opt out, but I thought you'd be interested in knowing what next week's Zoom webinar is going to be. So I was very careful to only send them information about, I used to call it last week, this week. So I'd say last week's webinar is up on the web, and here's this week's topic, right? And then eventually it was like I had too many emails to send every week, so I kind of quit on that. And I just, during these live webinars, I'll often mention and encourage people to opt into my main list. You can't go 2 seconds on my website without seeing one of my little opt-in forms that says get updates. So I just encourage people that way to sign up for my list. And obviously my hope is that somewhat organically, people who attend these webinars each Friday that I do will be encouraged to want more information from me. And that's the way to get it, is to sign up and opt in for my list, right? But going back to Jennifer's question, it's not that I don't see that there could be value in having slides, and back towards Elaine's comment, I know a lot of people like to get the slides. I would like to know, though, I would like to survey people who say attend conferences, because that's a big thing. Like when I've spoken at QuickBooks Connect is, everybody wants to be able to download the slides. I would like to know how many people actually take the time to go back through those slides later versus how many people download them, save them in a folder, never to be seen again, right? And Josh raises his hand, which is, by the way, is why I think giving them notes are so much more valuable. If you're, because even if I refer back to slides where I've just got some big text and some bullet points, unless I have a recording of what the person was saying, I sort of lose the whole context of what's going on those slides, right? I might get some, but I probably lose a lot of that context. And context is everything, right? I really can't get the full message out of a slide. This is all my opinion. You're welcome to disagree. So I really think having notes in a document, much more valuable thing to give to somebody. When I spoke at the last Scaling New Heights, I remember having this discussion with Joe a little bit, and because I did want to do my list building thing, and Joe shut it down. He's like, no, I can't have you doing that. I can't have you doing list building at my conference. And I was like, well, Joe, I'm giving away a lot more than what anybody else is giving away in their slide deck, with these documents that I'm offering. And long story short, it was too late for me to sort of backpedal and do more slide related stuff. So I was like, so I gave in. I caved and I said, okay, that's fine. I'll give away the documents for free. I turned them over to Joe so that he could give them away however he was going to do it. And I sort of did my list building off stage, like when I wasn't actually live talking on, in one of my sessions. I would just, when I talk to people one-on-one, I'd give them the web address to go to opt in, to get the same notes that they were going to get anyway from Scaling New Heights. But this was for people who very specifically and intentionally came to me and said, hey, I would really love to get those notes, right? And that, frankly, is one of the reasons, not all of it, but one of the reasons why I would probably never speak at Scaling New Heights again, because it's just, there's zero ROI in it for a speaker, at least from my perspective. QuickBooks, Intuit, QuickBooks Connect, they let me do it. They let me offer people, to go to a web page during my session to opt in and get, and bottom line is, I guess, I'm going to give value. I'm not going to jerk people around. It wouldn't be worth my while, let alone theirs, to have people opt into my list only to give them garbage, right? It's a waste of time. And so that actually kind of brings me back around to, the subject at hand for the day, which is, you know, when you're sitting down and thinking about doing a webinar, you know, there are some things you want to think about, right? And so we'll get into that actually, because we'll talk about what are your objectives? What do you hope will happen as a result of doing this webinar? But first, I want to talk about getting ideas, right? Because that's the first thing. And I mean, I've recently been struggling myself just coming up with ideas. I don't know why. Maybe it's like the webinar version of writer's block, because for years, every week, I had no problem. I could schedule it weeks. I could sit down and in 5 minutes, I could have, you know, a month's worth of topics scheduled out. And lately, I've just been having trouble. And I think that's more about me and just me trying to find inspiration. I'm constantly trying to sort of raise the bar, because I don't want to do something just for the sake of doing something. I don't want to put garbage out there. I always want to improve and make things better and better. And I think along those lines, I've been struggling myself with coming up with ideas that, you know, it's like the idea has to sort of wow me. I have to get excited about it before I'm going to put it on my list of things I'm going to cover in a webinar, you know. And sometimes what I'll do when I'm at a loss for ideas is I'll go through the Facebook groups and mine those Facebook groups and see what are people asking questions about. But just because people are asking questions about something, and just because I can answer those questions, doesn't mean I'm going to do a webinar on it. Because the one other factor that's really important to me there is, so first, people have to be asking questions about it. They have to be interested in learning what I can teach them, right? Second, I have to be qualified. I have to have the experience to share to be able to answer those questions. But third, and most importantly, I have to be excited about doing it. It has to be something I'm really interested in and excited about doing for people. Because if I'm not excited about it, that is definitely going to come across in my presentation, right? You know, it's just organic. There's nothing you can do about that. You can try, you can fake being excited about it, but I think that'll come across. You know, we can usually get a sense about it when somebody's sort of faking their excitement. We can probably all think of people that we've, you know, whose presentations we've been in. I'm sure we've seen this happen before, where somebody is so overtly and overly excited that it starts to come across as inauthentic, right? And that's a turnoff, right? And that's not who I am, you know, for sure. I need to be genuinely excited about a subject before I do it. So one of the first things I thought about when I thought about putting my notes together for today is, how do we mine the ideas? How do we get ideas? How do we keep track of them? And I've had a lot of systems for this over the years, and I've presented them before. Most recently, I think I had probably showed my process that I've had for tracking stuff in Airtable, right? Airtable was what I was using. But guess what I use today to track my webinar ideas? Can everybody take a guess? Come on, Josh.
I know.
Airtable.
No.
No.
Mind map? Whatever
No.
that-
Airtable is what I
ClickUp.
was using.
I-
ClickUp. Thank you,
yeah.
Jennifer. Gold star. Of course, ClickUp. Right? ClickUp is where I'm more and more. I'm just managing everything in ClickUp because I love it so much. So let's take a look, and I'll show you a little bit of what that looks like. So in ClickUp, I have this space called Content-Nerds Blog Plus. Right? Because even this I struggle with at the organizational level. Like, do I want a different content space for content that goes different places? I'm like, no, that's getting ridiculous. So then anything that becomes significant, like at the beginning of COVID, I started doing a bunch of CPA Academy stuff, right? Because they wanted me to do stuff on tools for working remotely. So I started doing that. Then I created this main content list. So this is really for things that I just want to write about and record videos about, and, you know, and post on my blog, which is, by the way, what I call Nerd Buzz. That's kind of replaced what I used to think of as my blog, right? And then I have the Bulletproof Bookkeeping webinars that I do every Wednesday, and then other content or webinars. So this is really for when people ask me, you know, to do things for them on their website or their webinar or whatever. The weekly emails that I send out. And then finally what we're doing right now, which is the Zoom in with Seth. So I'll click in here and kind of show you what this looks like. And so I just started moving over to the system from Airtable, right? So over here, you can see these are some of the recent ones that I did that are in a status of published. This is scheduled, right? So this is today's. Okay, when you click on here, it's in a status of scheduled. There's a link to the Google Doc, which is my kind of outline that I sketched out in Google Docs, you know, for what I wanted to cover today. And by the way, I created this right from within here. So it all starts now in ClickUp, and I created a Google file right here. And then when you click on this, it asks you to name your doc. It's going to create an actual Google Doc. But over here, I could change that and say, do a drawing, do sheets, do slides, right? So whatever I'm doing, of course, I'm a big fan of doing it with Google for all the reasons that I always say, you know, the collaborative capabilities, the ease with which I can share the stuff, and the ease with which I can just access the stuff no matter what. So this is what I've started to do, and I track the ideas. And then once I come up with the idea, it goes into upcoming webinars. And if I create a new idea in upcoming webinars, it will, let's just go in with a new task here. And my mouse battery is low. I forgot to charge it last night. So if I go create, well, screw it, I'll just do a new task in here and published, and enter, and then I'll click on here, and I'll show you what the statuses are. So there's a status for ideas, right? So that's where ideas go. And by the way, I'm looking at the folder, so you're seeing stuff that's in both upcoming and past webinars here. So if I go to upcoming webinars specifically, and ClickUp has just been really slow. And I know they've sort of addressed that. All right,
People
so,
have been complaining about it for a week or so.
yeah, I know, and they've said that they fixed it, but it doesn't seem like they've actually fixed it. So this idea is actually sitting, I guess, just at the folder level. So let me drag it over to upcoming webinars. That's one of the things about ClickUp is you really have to pay attention to what planet you're on here. So now I've got it in the upcoming webinars folder. So now you can see it goes from ideas to scheduled to published, basically. You know, there's some other stuff I think I've established, you know, in between here, right? Nope, scheduled, then recorded. That means it's been recorded. The web, like this webinar, will move into the recorded status once I'm finished for today, and then once I've uploaded it to my website and gotten everything set up, then it will move to the published status, right? And I'll keep these in here for a while because oftentimes when they're still kind of recent, I want to refer back to them, do follow-ups, do emails, and I'm going to talk about all this stuff. Is, you know, what do you do before the webinar? What do you do after the webinar, right? Because there's usually some follow-up we want to do. So these will stay in here for a while, and then eventually when they get stale enough, plus I have a system that is still in Airtable for tracking the record. It's like a log of everything I've ever published, and then it goes into my main content sort of project, which is what I use to share this stuff on social media, right? And I've taught that system before that I have where there's a Zap where I can go into this Airtable project, and I have a column with check boxes that I can check off for each different social network. So I can check the Twitter box next to any given you know, line item for something that I've published, whether it be a webinar or something I've published on Nerd Buzz, whatever it is. I can check off that Twitter checkbox, and that's going to trigger Zapier to add it into my Buffer app to queue it to go out on social media just to share the stuff. It's just a very efficient way of sharing the things that I've already published. And that way, in like 30 seconds, I can schedule like 100 posts if I want to, right? So here's where I did the recent one on lead generation tips, tricks, and apps. And I had some notes for myself. There was some stuff on AppSumo that I was going through just to kind of do some research for apps that were designed to help with these things, lead generation tips and tricks and apps. This is the link to the Zoom webinar backend, which while when I'm approaching the day, I often want quick access to click on this and get me in case I need to edit or update something. Sometimes I get an email or a Slack message from Greg saying, hey, you screwed up. You called it 8 p.m. instead of 8 a.m. And so this gives me a quick link to get right into the back end of that webinar registration page from Zoom where I can make any changes, tweaks, what have you. And then here is something I created in Airtable. I'm not even sure what this was exactly. Let's go see. Oh, this was the link to the actual item in Airtable in my events calendar. This is the stuff that ultimately appears in the events page on my website, right? And so this is my Airtable project specifically around all my events. Here's today's, right? So in that case, and this is what I've started to do with a lot of these is create these kind of notes. I just like to give myself that sort of trail of breadcrumbs. And this is how I just manage this whole thing at a high level. I even have the file path to the Google Drive folder that's local, that's really streamed, you know, in my G Drive, which is my Google Drive file stream folder. So I can quickly get in here, and this is where I've got the documents and the files and anything else that I've created around this webinar specifically, right? So that's kind of the first piece of this, is really tracking and managing your ideas and moving them from the idea stage to the scheduled stage to the published stage, right? And so that's important. We need to have a process for that, okay? Next, we want to develop the content, obviously, right? That's kind of the next logical thing. Before I even schedule it, I'm guilty of often scheduling it before I've developed the content, but like my mother used to always say to me growing up, she would say, do as I say, not as I do, right? And she sounded, actually she didn't sound like that at all, but she would say that. She would say, do as I say, not as I do. So that's what I'm saying to you here. Don't do what I do, because I end up overwhelming myself with so much stuff that I do that I often do things a lot later, you know, and more towards the last minute than I care to admit. But what you should do is develop the content before you've scheduled it. Be ready so that by the time you've scheduled it and having developed all the content, you can easily grab excerpts from that content to do the promotional part, which I'm also going to talk about. But first, let's develop the content, right? So Dynalist, as I'm sure you probably could have guessed, is a great tool for this that I'm going to suggest, because Dynalist is the perfect tool for outlining something, right? So here's my next webinar and the outline. So the first thing, and I'm going to outline what I'm doing with you today. So the first thing is manage ideas, I said, right? I have to talk about that. Then I said, let's talk about developing the content. And next, we're going to schedule the webinar, and I'll talk about that. Then we promote the webinar. Okay, and then we follow up after the webinar. These are the main things I wanted to talk about with you this morning, right? So managing ideas, I just showed you ClickUp, right? And sometimes for me to outline the webinar, that's enough for me to know. Like I said, that's my version of that one-word slide, where I see the word ClickUp on the slide and I present that to you if I'm using, you know, slides, and I'd say, okay, I'm going to talk about ClickUp. And for me, that means I'm going to demonstrate ClickUp. I'm going to do exactly what I just did, which is show you, here's how I use ClickUp for this, right? And give you some ideas and things you can use yourself right away. And of course, I'm always encouraging people that if you don't use ClickUp and you use something else, I'm sure you can figure out your equivalent version of how to set this process up in whatever app it is that you use. I've just found that when somebody presents something to me and they're sort of intentionally vague about what it looks like and how they actually do it, and I've been told by people, because I've asked them, I've been told by people, well, I don't want to sort of steer you. I want you to think about it generically. And my answer to that is no. My philosophy is the opposite. I want to show you at least one example of exactly what it looks like and how I do it in a specific product. That way, if you want to use that product because you like the way I've done and you like how that gets laid out, great. If not, I believe, I guess what I'm really trying to say is I'm giving you more credit than other people might for being smart enough to be able to say, well, I see how he does it in ClickUp, but I'm using Asana or Teamwork or whatever I'm using, and I'm just going to adapt his process into my own. I mean, I do that all the time with stuff. I'm enrolled in a program now where they taught me a process for how to do something, and they had a simple spreadsheet with kind of an outline for what to do and how to do it. And I said, you know, this would work a lot better for me in ClickUp. So I took their process, I adapted it in ClickUp, and it works beautifully, and I love it. And I've got like a well-oiled machine around this process that I've built for what I'm doing in ClickUp with that, right? I mentioned Airtable, also a great place to keep track of this stuff. That's, like I said, that's what I was using before I started doing this in ClickUp most recently. Okay, and you can just use a Google Doc. You can use Google Sheets. It doesn't matter. You just need a place that as you get ideas, as you get fleeting thoughts, and you're in a meeting or in a Zoom with somebody and an idea pops in your head and you're like, hey, that would be a great subject for a webinar that I can do. You just want to jot that down somewhere and maybe make a few notes to remember your train of thought. Because I've done that before too. I've jotted down ideas, but I've just written like a phrase. And then a week, 2 weeks, or even more than that later, I look back at it and I'm like, I have no idea what I was thinking. And then I just have to kind of scratch the whole thing because I can't remember what on earth my thought process was behind, you know, where I was going with that thought or idea. So I've learned to always make some additional notes to trigger the memory of, you know, what I really was thinking around that subject or topic or phrase, right? Because a lot of times when we get into developing the content, that's what we're going to do is we're going to kind of pick a topic, right? So under developing the content, like I said, Dynalist is a great place to do it. We're also going to probably get into Google Docs at some point. And then Google Slides, of course, if you are inclined to want to do a slide presentation with it, right? And then, so what's the first thing we're really going to do when we're developing the content? So first, let's call this tools, right? And I'll move those in because then underneath developing the content, I want to create the outline, right? So we'll start with a topic, which in this case is a webinar on how to do webinars, right? Okay, and that's or in other words, a title. And that title can evolve. Sometimes your original topic, even though that's not necessarily changed in terms of what you're going to talk about, it's still, you might come up with a better title, especially after you've spent the time writing out the content, because you want the title to be catchy. You want it to be something that makes people, kind of turn their head to the side and go, I need to find out what he's talking about, right? We want the title is the headline that's supposed to attract people to want to find out more. So that's important. But you're going to start with that, right? And now we want to think about some things. First of all, ask yourself this question: what am I going to show people that they couldn't do before or didn't know? Right? Think about that. That's important because now you're starting to now you're starting to move towards what's the objective? What's the ultimate goal here? What do I want to teach people? After they're done watching my webinar, what is it they're going to be able to do that they couldn't do before, or what will they know that they didn't know before, right? Next, and this is what I was mentioning earlier. So this is really before we even get to the outline, is the objectives, right? What am I hoping to accomplish here? All right, so let's put that, and this is why I love Dynalist, because look how easy it makes it to reorganize things, right? Now, what do I want them to do by the end of the webinar? I can't type today. Right, and I've got some ideas. Maybe you want their email. Right, we want to get them to opt in for our list. Maybe I want them to buy or sign up for something. Right, maybe the purpose of the webinar is to get people interested in signing up for, some kind of live support or private one-on-one, training, or maybe this is the free webinar that's designed to get people to sign up for the paid webinar or paid series for the course, so maybe you want them to buy or sign up for something, right? Maybe you want them to refer people to you. Maybe you're doing a webinar that's designed to encourage people to sign up for your affiliate program, right? So you have to really think about what is your objective? What do you want people to do by the end of this webinar? If you're not clear on that, then the people watching your webinar are going to be clear on that. And it's very much conceivable that your only objective is to share something that you think would be of interest and value to people, and that you have no other agenda. And that's fine. Maybe your only agenda is to get people in the habit of coming and watching your weekly Zoom every week, right? Which a lot of times is my only agenda here with the Friday Zoom. The Bulletproof Bookkeeping webinars that I do every Wednesday, that has more of an agenda in that I'm hoping that it will serve to promote the Bulletproof Bookkeeping course. And even there, I don't follow this outline as well as I should, because I don't really issue the call to action as much as I should, reminding people to sign up. And the truth is, I think a lot of the people who are attending, because I've been doing a terrible job of promoting it, are people who are already in the course, which is, again, it's totally fine. But if you're asking me to teach you how to do a webinar, then you should have this more clearly defined, right? That I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't tell you that, the right way to do it. A lot of the stuff I do simply because I enjoy it, and I don't really care what the outcome is. And in the big picture, the outcome has always proved worthwhile for me. Anyway, right now, once we've got the objective down, we can start writing, right? And at this point, you just want to start writing. This is where you'll probably want to open up a Google Doc. You could do it here in Dynalist, right? but you know, this is where you start writing. You get into the outline, right? And the outline is going to be structured with, you're going to kind of write your subheadings. What are the major topics that I want to cover? And once you do eventually get into, say, Google Docs, that's going to come with an H2 tag, a heading 2, right? It's going to be bold, because by the time you're done with those subheadings, if somebody were to just read the subheadings in your document, that should give them a very clear idea of what's being covered in the webinar. And one of the reasons for making sure to do it that way is if we are going to publish this written outline, let's say after the fact alongside the video, then a lot of people are going to skim it exactly that way. They're going to read all those subheadings. We call that deck copy, right? And because they read that deck copy, and if that gets them interested, then they go back and read between the lines, quite literally, right? So the major topics are the H2 tags, and then within that we have the actual content, right? So a lot of times when I get to this part, I'll actually take first I'll build my major outline in Dynalist, and then I'll copy and paste that into Google Docs. And one of the other reasons I love doing this in Dynalist is because I'll show you how nicely this will copy and paste into a Google Doc. So I'm just going to select this whole thing, and I'll just Control C, select Control C, Control V, boom. And now I can go into, let's say the rest of this I feel like I can just keep in the Dynalist document, right? So I can actually pull this all out, and this is all I care about. I do always like having somewhere in my outline a list of the tools that I'm talking about, because oftentimes that can be useful in terms of, first of all, again, another sort of objective or call to action. Maybe maybe while I'm at it, as long as I'm going to be doing this stuff and sharing this with people, maybe the only call to action is I want that if people are going to try any of these tools, that I give them an affiliate link that they can use to sign up for the tool, so I can get credit for sending them there, right? And I have a Dynalist share link that I can give out for people, and I have a Google Docs affiliate link that I can share with people, not Google Docs, but G Suite. So if somebody wanted to sign up for paid G Suite, they could do it through me and get signed up, and I'll get credit for that. I'll get it. They send me a commission. I don't think I've ever gotten paid before, because I never remembered to do exactly what I just told you should do. And then this, again, is separate. The purpose of this document here is really just to outline the content, right? So the outline, major topics. Now I can show you what I'm talking about. I highlight this. This gets an H2, a heading 2, right? This is the actual. So let's first do the major topics before I get into the content, right? And I kind of gave it to you before. So let's go back to Dynalist, right? And then we'll go collapse all of this for a minute. Here's my major topics. So Control C over here, Control V. So these are really all the H2s. Okay, and then I can go in here and start writing. And really at this point, I wouldn't want this in bulletproof form like this, because I need it in more of a document form.
You say bulletproof form?
I did say bulletproof in bullet point form. See what's on my mind? One track mind. And then let me just back this up. And sometimes when I want it, like this is just for reference later while I'm developing this. So one of my favorite things to do to just kind of section it off is the horizontal line. Because then now I can talk about, all right, manage ideas. ClickUp is the tool. I can't type. ... Right? Over here, I can start talking about the objectives. Also notice what this is doing. On the left, it's creating the outline based on these topic tags, right? So for this part, I might actually make H1, right? Because this is what I'm doing here is I've got the major topics, and then over here I've got, manage ideas and so on. So the objectives I just told you, have an objective, or what is your objective, define that. And then one of the reasons for this coming before the actual content is developed is because we want, knowing what the objectives are will very likely and very often shape the content itself, right? So that's why there's an order to this. So then we develop the content, right? So discuss, well, this is really what I would ultimately be sharing with you after this, right? So write the outline exactly as shown here, dot, dot, dot. Again, in the actual one, I'd have more details, right? And then we can get to this part, right? Where we're going to schedule the webinar. So of course, what I'm going to suggest is that you can use Zoom, the webinar product. But by the way, I've recently been playing around with alternatives to Zoom. I've been very curious. When all this COVID stuff started and everybody went crazy with Zoom, a lot of people were sharing articles about alternatives to Zoom, because then things were coming out about Zoom not being secure, which they've addressed all that, and they did a great job of that. But in the meantime, I was reading a lot of articles about quote unquote alternatives to Zoom, and they were all awful. And I'll explain why I say that. Almost every single one of these articles, and we're talking articles on major online publications, like Forbes and Inc. and Entrepreneur. I don't know if those are the ones specifically where I saw the articles I'm thinking of, but the point is major publications, ones where you would normally really want to trust what they're sharing. And they all kind of follow the same format where they're making suggestions for quote unquote alternatives. Every single one of them mentioned FaceTime as an alternative, and then went on to explain why it's not a viable alternative because it's only good for iOS. And it's like, well, then why are you wasting my time with this? That's not a Zoom alternative. That's exactly not an alternative to Zoom, because it fails on a major point, which is that it's very limited in terms of who I can use it with, right? Whereas Zoom is universally available to anyone, regardless of what device, regardless of mobile or web or any of it, right? So that's a terrible option to choose in your list of quote unquote alternatives to Zoom. So I've been researching viable alternatives to Zoom, right? And so one thing I looked at recently is called livewebinar.com. And there's a lot of things I like about this. So as I'm developing my outline, I'm going to go to the website, grab the URL, and I'm going to stick it in here, because then we're talking about Zoom alternatives. And I'm going to bold this, right? And watch what happens when I bold it and I add a line underneath. It shows it as a sort of subheading under schedule the webinar, because that's kind of the order. You have H1, H2, and then you have H3, but between H2 and H3 would be the bold text. Anything that you bold, right? So we're doing Zoom alternatives here. So live webinar. Now what it did was it took it away, because I'm doing this as bold also. As soon as I take that off bold, it puts it back. So Google Docs really tries to analyze the structure of your content and determine what really belongs in this outline. And by the way, and as you can now see, if I want to, I can remove something from the outline if I don't actually want it there. So live webinar is one, and there is another one I was just recently looking at. I got onto the guy's email list, and now he's been spamming me every day. What do you call it? I wish I could remember what the heck it was called. But anyway, there are some very viable Zoom alternatives that you can look at. And so I started looking around. I started poking around at some of these to see, what's available, what's really viable. In terms of what I could use instead of Zoom. And what I like about some of these alternatives is Zoom is it's just to do webinars, right? Some of these other products have other features built in that will help you with the whole marketing process and the cycle, that will help you with, creating a landing page to promote the webinar and all the stuff I want to talk about in another minute in terms of what to do to promote the webinar. So don't assume Zoom is the only option. There are some other really good options out there that I'm starting to research. And I was close with this one. The only thing I didn't love was Zoom comes with a phone bridge, meaning if I set up a Zoom webinar, instantly I have a phone number that I can include when I want to share that webinar with people, so they can call in instead of just using computer audio. I have not heard of jitsi.org, but I'll put that down here. I'm looking in the chat. Let me just click on that. And so Jennifer in the chat mentions this. And so I'm going to add this to my outline. And in fact, that's why it's irking me that I can't remember and that I didn't prepare ahead of time and pull out this other one that I've been getting emails about, because it's, the one thing is this guy's really he's really focused on the marketing side of it. And along those lines, let me see if I go into my trash. I probably deleted his email from this morning because I've been getting an email from him just about every day. And I think what that speaks to is this guy is really focused on the marketing side of this. So let me just see if I can quickly find him in my trash bin here. I may not have trashed it. It's probably archived, come to think of it. Because the other thing, by the way, when I do get marketing emails from marketers, I often do save them because I study them. Even if I'm not interested in what they're actually marketing, I like to study their process. Anyway, I can't find it. If I come back to it, if I find it, or by the time I get his next email, which will be later today or tomorrow, I'll kind of add it into my outline, which I can share with all of you after this. So whatever product you're going to choose to use, and assuming you're going to choose to use Zoom, it's obviously very easy to schedule a webinar in Zoom. I've got Zoom in my Office folder in my Chrome bookmarks. And because I have the webinar product, I have this option here, webinars and schedule a webinar. You can create templates and you can build a webinar off of a template. The reason I don't like to do that is watch what happens, and especially because the order that it's in. So my next webinar, right? And of course I'd enter a description. Usually by the time I get here, I've already got the description written up. It would have been an Airtable or it might be in ClickUp now. So I'm just copying and pasting it into here. And then I go here and it says use a template. So I can, I had created some templates here like new Zoom, or here's a Zoom in with Seth, right? So as soon as I click this, I just lost everything I did up here, which I think is really stupid. This is not what I care about in the template. What I care about actually, which they don't do, is the time I would want it to go to the next Friday and 8 a.m., which is when I do these, right? So pick a Friday. 8 a.m. This is why I often need Greg to remind me, because if this somehow defaulted to PM, I often forget to change this. And then that's when Greg will send me a message saying I screwed up. And then, the options here are pretty straightforward. I always have the video on for both hosts and panelists and so on and so forth. The other thing you'll want to do with Zoom is go through all of these settings, and notice the settings are broken up into these three areas. You have meeting, recording related settings, and then telephone, right? So if you don't use their phone bridge, you can use another if you want to, third-party audio and so on. So I didn't love live webinar because it didn't come natively with that, but actually when I looked into it and what it costs to add on a phone bridge in their plans, then the pricing came out actually about the same as what Zoom webinar costs anyway. So it actually, comparing the two side by side, in other words, I had an option for not including a phone bridge at all, and it would be less expensive. So if for some reason the nature of your content that you're doing in the form of webinars was such that you don't care to have people calling in by phone, maybe you have a high-tech audience and everybody's got computer audio, right? Who knows? So you can skip that cost if you wanted to, although I think at this point there's still a lot of people who won't use computer audio, can or don't want to. So I think you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you're not going to give people an option to call in by phone when they want to, right? So I think it's important. But point being, whether you're using Zoom or you're using one of these alternatives, there's some great options out there in terms of what you can use to do webinars. And when trying to decide which one is right, again, it goes back to what are my objectives? Am I really using these webinars as a marketing tool? Then I might not want Zoom. I might want one of these other products that actually has more features around the marketing part of it, right?
When do you, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
When do you use Zoom webinar versus Zoom meeting?
I almost always use Zoom webinar because I have it. So it's kind of like, why not use the more robust thing? But
what does it have that isn't in the meetings, I guess?
To be honest, nothing. If I'm just using it to do like a call with somebody and I'm not actually doing a webinar, there's probably nothing I'm using in the webinar product there's nothing unique to the webinar product that I'm using for that. In other words, I wouldn't get the webinar product unless I was actually doing webinars. And then the Zoom app that sits on your desktop, which I don't believe I can share on my screen share here. I don't think that will render. Right. will, if I'm just setting up a meeting like for you and I, Jennifer, let's say to do a one-on-one call from the
Right.
app, I'm just going to schedule a new meeting. I'm not going to use the webinar for that. There's no need to.
Right.
And to be honest, I'm not 100% clear on what's available in one that's not the other. I think meetings you can do breakout rooms. Am I wrong about that?
You might not be able to, and I don't know, can you, because I haven't found in meetings that you can live stream meetings, can you?
The live streaming product may also only be available in the webinar. I don't know. I think you can't live stream like I'm doing now to Facebook unless you're using the webinar product. That might be true also. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, I mean, you can go on their website, I'm sure, and compare
And
like
find
the
the,
features.
the difference,
Because I honestly don't remember. The main thing that motivated me to get their webinar product was the registration process. I wanted to be able to have a registration process where people could, could register to come to the webinar, right? And then Zoom does give you some great reports that you can use, especially when I've done Zooms on topics where I had, more than 100 people registered. Then when I see it's going in that direction, then it gets interesting. I download the reports from Zoom, and I just kind of like to see like how many people are registered. Are we going to hit 100? Are we going to go over 100? And I've done a few in the past year where I actually had well over 100 people registered, but not all of them show up. So I still didn't go over the actual 100-person threshold that you're limited to with the initial sort of Zoom plan. Because to get more than 100 people in a webinar live at once, then you have to go up to, it starts to get very expensive very quickly, because the next step up is like 500 people or something like that. It can be costly. But if you're attracting that large of an audience, then presumably there's going to be a call to action, which is going to result in some kind of ROI. So it's probably worth spending the extra money at that point, right? So then we want to promote the webinar, right? So how do we promote the webinar? What are we going to do there? A number of things, right? So, and this is where I constantly stress, especially recently when we talked about generating leads and things, we got to have an email list, right? So send an email, right? Do you have a Facebook group? Especially if you're developing a business online and you want to build that email list, it probably makes sense to have a Facebook group, because then in some ways the Facebook group kind of feeds the email list. You go into the Facebook group, you post things, you share value, you get people interested in learning more about what you can share with them. And so they'll be encouraged to sign up for your emails, because it's all about value, right? This all goes under the heading of, and the assumption that I'm delivering valuable information to people, right? In other words, you can't BS people. They see through it. Especially this day and age, more than ever, we're just blind to the BS. We're so sick and tired of being bombarded with marketing messages that unless you're actually delivering something of real value to people and you can prove it, nobody's going to want to sign up for your email list. So just make sure the stuff you know what it really comes down to, it's not hard. It's just care. Just actually care and put in the effort. And I forget where I posted this, but recently I posted this, and it was something I was getting from someone else where I was saying the effort, you shouldn't fake effort. You should actually genuinely put in the effort because you actually do care. If you fake effort, it's going to come across in some way, shape, or form that you're not that sincere, that you're faking it, right? Don't fake it till you make it. Just actually care and do it, right? Another thing for promoting, of course, you should probably have a Facebook page, right? So again, a Facebook page like I have, and I'm terrible at this stuff lately because I've just been so busy with other things and there have been other priorities. And by now I just count on the fact that I've been doing this for so many years that people will just kind of know, go to the events page and register for anything that's of interest to you based on the subject matter. So, and I could do better about posting on my Facebook page, reminding people and encouraging them to go to the events page and sign up, so again, it's do as I say, not as I do. Instagram is a great place to go to promote these things. What are you going to do with Instagram? Well, you're probably going to want to use something like Snagit, right, to create images. All my webinars have an image that go with it. I usually grab those images from some stock photo site like Pexels or Adobe Stock or dreamstime.com. And what you can do with Instagram, if you want to get creative and really put the time in, is you can go to a site like Canva, and you can develop your own little graphic and put text on it and do whatever you want to do to promote the webinar. With as much space as you have in an image like that, you're limited, which is how it should be. you don't want to overwhelm people with like a wall of text telling them to sign up for your webinar. You want a few short pointed messages that basically encourage people to want to find out more, right? You really do have to sort of bait people in by giving them clickbait, by saying, hey, you know, I'm going to do a webinar that's going to transform your world because you're going to know how to do X, Y, and Z much more easily or at all, you know, which you didn't know how to do before. Remember what I outlined at the beginning. And that goes back to why the outline is really important, because with those kinds of objectives in mind, knowing very clearly what I'm going to help people to be able to do that they couldn't do before, now that filters right into my messaging when I'm trying to do this part, which is promote the webinar. Right? If you really have time and want to put the effort in, if this is like a major webinar that you're doing and not something you just do every week like I do, then you probably want to spend some time being much more detailed in a document like this about who's the target audience and what those objectives are. The more details you can fill in, the easier the marketing part becomes, the promotional part, because now you've already written all the copy you need. You're literally just copying and pasting stuff out of that document and profile that you've come up with and putting it into your messages. You're taking excerpts, right? And you have to arouse curiosity. You have to, again, you have to give people bait. You know, it sounds lousy, but it's really not lousy, especially if, in fact, behind that, you do plan on delivering some real value. And here's another suggestion. If you're inclined to do videos, go get Camtasia and record a teaser or trailer. I did something like that a while ago, just playing around, where I was, you know, I teach Excel classes at Santa Monica College. And before all this COVID stuff, you know, because now we're doing them online, of course, via Zoom, but I was curious to see how effective it might be. So I recorded a little trailer showing the end result, you know, showing that once you've learned how to do the stuff I'm going to teach you in this Excel class, here's what it looks like. And I had prepared some really nice looking pivot tables and even an example of Excel lets you, you know, obviously with the right kind of data, it lets you plot a map, like a heat map. So if I have sales data that's got some column in it that describes the region, you know, what country or what part of the world those sales took place in, I can actually get Excel to plot that on a heat map to show you where the higher concentrations of sales are, you know, in that data. And so that's just a really cool visual that I was able to do and take a screenshot of it. And actually not as well, the screenshot would be for like the Instagram part, but I was able to do a short Camtasia video, like a 60-second video that just kind of teased people and said, here's what I'm going to teach you how to do. And, you know, so again, you want to show people that what the end looks like, because that's the transformation. That shows them the example of what they're going to be able to do. That's going to resonate with people because they're going to look at that and go, I want to learn how to do that. Right? So that's how you promote the webinar, that's the exact reaction you want to provoke in people, right?
How do you track where, like, do you track what comes from Facebook group, what comes from Facebook page, what comes from Instagram? I mean, you could use it in unique bit.ly, I suppose, but.
I should, I don't. Actually, Zoom gives you an option to create unique registration URLs. Oh. So right within Zoom, you can actually track where the registration came from. I'll show you exactly where that is, because I'm glad you brought that up, Linda. It's a really good question. And again, there's a lot that I should do that I don't, because I just have to prioritize. But if I go to schedule a new webinar, and let me see, I may have to create the webinar before.
I'm just curious, because I'm the one that does like all the pictures and the social marketing for Thursday's stuff. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, I'm trying to saturate it. I don't know where it's doing the best, so I don't have to overextend.
Right. Let me see if I go into an existing one, like here is next Friday's, right? So here's this is all set up. And then here it is, so source tracking under invite attendees. And again, this is definitely only going to be available in the webinar product, not the meetings. But here's where I can add. And so I can, and they even use Facebook in the example, right? And I can be even more specific. I can say Facebook page versus group, right?
Yeah.
So Facebook page, add, now and I can add these all day, right?
So then when you do the social post, you can have it in there. So when they click it, you'll get the head count. Yeah,
exactly. And Zoom will track it for me. So that way you'll see how many registrations, how many visitors. I feel like this is out of order. I feel like I'd want to see the visitors first and how many of the visitors registered, but what do I know? I don't create the Zoom product. I just use it. But this is exactly, so then you would make sure to share this link on your Facebook page, this link in your Facebook group, and so on, right? do another one for Instagram. And by the way, the strategy with Instagram, since you can't really register a live link in an Instagram profile, is you go into your Instagram account and you just edit your profile. See how I've got this one that has you go to the /bulletproof page, right? So you'll just edit your profile. And while you're promoting this webinar, change the website and have it point to either the Zoom registration page, but better than the Zoom registration page, because if the registration is over and I forget to go back and update that, I'm sending people to a dead zone. So what I usually will do is I'll create a page on my website. Like in my case, what I might do is redirect them to the page where all the events are located. So if I go to my site and then under products and programs is where I have the live events page, right? So I just browse here just so I can grab the URL, and then I might stick that in here for now and then submit. And that way, when I post that promotional piece on Instagram that encourages people to want to go register for the webinar, in the copy, I can put check my profile link to go register.
That with the pointing finger so that people know to go. I know, I see
Yeah.
that all the time.
Yep, and I mean, I can certainly put the URL in the Instagram post. It just won't render. It won't be clickable.
Right.
So you can encourage people to copy and paste. The other thing that you can remind people of is, even as I'm here in the back end, if I were to highlight this whole thing and right-click, Chrome, and I believe other browsers do the same thing, will give me this option right here. It recognizes that I've highlighted and right-clicked on a link, on a URL, so it gives me the option right here to go there, right? So teach people this. In your posts, teach people this to make it easy for you, to make it easy for them, to get them where you want them to go. Right? Finally, what are we going to do to follow up after the webinar? First of all, let's take a look at some Zoom options. I think we'll find some stuff that's interesting under branding here at the bottom. This is going to take them, I actually have to update this because I don't think that link is good anymore. I can set this in the global settings too, so every new webinar will grab the link that I put here. But this is where I'm going to send them after they attend this webinar, right? Why not take advantage of the opportunity to send them to, and I have to think again, my objectives, my call to action. If I want to have them opt into my email list because they're so excited about the webinar I just did that they definitely want to get more updates from me, then I can take them to a landing page, that simply asks them to opt in and join my revolution, right? So this is an important thing. You can also take them here to a post-webinar survey, which, by the way, now that I've started playing around with Jot Forms, which is a beautiful tool to do something like that with, I'm probably going to create a survey that will just be sort of generally applicable for anyone who's attended one of these Zooms. And I'm going to send you there because I would love to get more feedback to find out what people would like more of and what people would like less of, right? So I can do the survey after the webinar. All I have to do is click this on and put the URL of the survey in, right? You can do this with Google Forms too. You can do it with anything. So again, follow up. Make sure you understand clearly what you want people to do after they're done with the webinar, right? And I mean, that's pretty much it. Then again, if you do have the list of email addresses for everybody who registered, because that's one of the other things that's nice about the webinar product is you're going to capture their emails. So again, it's not really kosher to put them onto your email list, but there's no reason you can't grab that list of emails from this webinar's registration and send them a one-time follow-up. Make it clear this is just a one-time follow-up I'm sending you because I know you had registered for this webinar. Zoom will also tell you who actually attended live and who didn't. And you can even build this into Zoom directly. You can have a generic email that automatically goes out to the people who didn't attend, right? Encouraging them that, hey, check back on this page on my website since you didn't catch the live, the recording is going to be here. And, so think about this stuff. Take the time. You can build it out. But you can also manually just download the emails. You can tell which ones attended, which ones didn't. I think it even tells you how many minutes they were on the webinar for. So you can even see if somebody signed into the live webinar, but they signed out after 15 minutes, you can look at, set a threshold and email all the people who quit after a certain threshold of time that you would consider to be very short, that you would consider might indicate they weren't actually interested in the webinar. Go out and get their feedback. Ask them to let you know, hey, what was it about the webinar? Some people will probably get back and say, oh, the webinar was great. I just had something came up. I had to go, right? So there's a lot that you can do with the data that you'll get from Zoom, and I'm sure all these other live webinar products that we do, And so just to quickly recap as I'm wrapping up here, the tools of the trade, some of the things we talked about today. Of course, we talked about Zoom. We talked about some alternatives. We talked about Canva. I think I even mentioned Snag. Yeah, I did mention Snagit. You know, it's a great tool while you're developing that outline. You might want to take screenshots, especially if your webinar involves some kind of a software demo. You can throw some screenshots into your outline that you're going to share with people that will serve as, you know, some people just like to read and they like the screenshots instead of having to scrub a video timeline to figure out where something was. So you can use tools like Snagit or even Canva to put some nice screenshots in there, you know, and then you have your final product after the fact, the follow-up after the webinar. When you post the recording on your website, you drive people over and say, and that can be another opportunity to get their email addresses, to get them to opt in, say, hey, sign up for my list and I'll send you the link to where you can access the recording of this webinar along with all the notes. And then what will happen is, and you can make it clear in that message, what your notes will include, that it's not just some BS notes, that it's really a robust set of notes with screenshots and a detailed outline. Make it clear that there's some meat in here so that people will be encouraged to want to give you their email, if nothing else, just to see, oh my God, what's this amazing resource this person just created for me, right? And hopefully they'll get there and have that reaction and say, wow, this is an amazing resource, because the ultimate call to action, and you can ask people to do this specifically, is that somebody comes over after the fact. Maybe they've seen the webinar, maybe they haven't. Either way, they end up going over, they see the recording and the notes that you've provided, and they're so blown away that now they can't help but tell other people, right? So take the people who have signed up for this webinar, who have sort of joined with you to see what you have to offer, and turn them into a pseudo sales force, because you get them so excited about what an amazing resource you've given them. And especially considering you haven't asked them for a dime, you know, you want them to think you're crazy. Like, this person's nuts. How are they giving all this stuff away for free? That should really be the reaction that you get from people. It should be that good that they're like, how is this person giving all of this away for free? This is incredible, right? And so that's the follow-up. That's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate reaction you want to get from people. And that kind of detail should be in an outline that you've written somewhere. What is my ultimate objective? Why am I doing this webinar? What do I want the outcome to look like? And a lot of times we start writing what the outcome is, but we don't go nearly deep enough, right? If you really want to build a platform where you've appealed to an audience, where you've built an intimate relationship with people, where they know that you truly care about them and truly care about their success, then you have to go deep. You have to get into the feelings. You have to get into what's the person's mindset. Why did they come to my webinar in the first place? What were their fears? What were their concerns? What am I helping them to overcome? And then I need to take a look at what's the person's mindset after they're done with my webinar. Have I put them at ease? Have I made them feel safe? Have I made them feel like they have a solution now where they didn't have one before? Have I gotten them unstuck? Right? Because the reason somebody comes to learn anything is they're stuck. And my job as the presenter, as the teacher, is to get them unstuck, right? I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about some things, and they were sharing with me that, you know, they wanted to build this whole kind of platform, or they would provide like a membership kind of thing. And I mentioned teaching, and they were like, well, I don't want to teach. And in my head, I'm thinking, you've completely missed the point. Anything you do by way of any kind of training and education or any kind of membership, that's exactly what you're doing. You're teaching people. And it might have been just, you know, nomenclature, because the person was saying to me, oh, I don't want to teach. I just want to offer them resources. Well, that's what you're doing when you're teaching, is you're offering resources. So anyway, I know I'm going over. I don't want to hold you hostage. As always, I hope you did get something out of this and enjoy it. And maybe you had some fun along the way. I don't know. Maybe I made you laugh. Maybe I said something inappropriate that was still funny. Maybe I said something appropriate that was funny. I don't know. But hopefully you'll tell other people what an amazing webinar this was, and then more people will sign up for next week's.
Send me a survey. No.
Yep. I'll send you a survey. No, Jotforms is fun. Actually, it's a kind of thing where it gets me excited to build something like that, because it's just a fun tool to play with. So I probably will send you all a survey. Maybe I won't. Maybe I won't have time. But that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And you know how to find me if you have any follow-up questions. So find me, ask me. We have a Facebook group called Accounting Business Academy. And I have a program called 97 and Up, which, by the way, you can get these kind of answers 24/7, 365, and not just from me. So I will see you all around the World Wide Web.
Yes.
The WWW.
That's right.